All right, good morning. This video segment here, what we're going to do is go through hooking up a John Deere Moco, specifically the 600 series Moco with a clevis hitch option to the tractor. There's three options of hitches on the John Deere Mocos. You have the clevis hitch, you have the equal angle hitch, and then you have a 2-point model. Most of what we sell around here is the clevis hitch, and so we'll talk about how to hook that up here. So just a few points. Once you get it all set up, typically you're probably not going to change it, but specifically, you know, for salesmen, if you're out there starting a machine, these are just some simple things to check while you're hooking it up, because you're going to be hooking it to a lot of different tractors, and you're going to have different tire sizes, different drawbar lengths, different things like that. And so in order to get the Moco to do what we want it to do at an optimal level, if we do a few things right here, we'll be just fine. So number one, when you back up to the tractor, we got to prepare the tractor. The wheel spacing is important on hay tools because we want to be able to straddle the windrow. And whether you're baling or you're cutting, you like to be able to straddle the windrow and not drive on it if at all possible. And so what we like to do is get our tires in between our tires. We like to get them out, you know, to that 5 foot or so in between your tires. So that means you're going to have to set your front wheels and your back wheels out. That's a good thing to do on all hay tools. Second thing, when we get that taken care of, the drawbar is the next thing. So before you ever hook up, a couple of things. First of all, drawbar height. Typically, whether it's a round baler or a Moco, we like to get into that 16, I'll do it over here. We like to get into that 16 to 20 inch range. Okay, so we're about 16 inches right now to the top of that drawbar, and that's pretty good. As long as we're at 16 to 20, we can level the Moco out pretty good, and it'll cut the way we want. If you've got too much, if it's too high, you won't be able to get a low enough cut height, and if it's too low, then you won't be able to get a high enough cut height. Second thing you do before you hook it up is measure the end of your PTO shaft to your drawbar pinhole. There's two settings. You got 14 and 16 inches. 14 is for 540, 16 is for 1,000. So then once we hook up, you back up, you drop the pin, and you lock the pin down. Then we hook up our PTO. It's lock back collar, just like that. Now, after we hook up our PTO, the one thing about the Pto Drive Lines on our mower conditioners is that they are a U-joint drive line, which means they like to be straight. They like to run straight and level. And so this drive line right here, you can see that it's running just a little bit uphill. I'd rather see that run just a little more level. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to come over here to this bolt right over here. I'm going to have to loosen this one up, probably loosen this one just a little bit. And this is a jacking bolt right here. And I'm going to have to actually raise the back end of the Moco up so that the driveline comes up so that it'll run level. Once you set that, you're probably not going to have to change that. That's going to be really different for different tractors. You know, different tractors have different tire sizes. Some of your older tractors, 30, 40, 50 series tractors, sometimes to get the drawbar height, you got to flip the drawbar over, and then you have to set this differently. So it's going to be a little bit different for a lot of different tractors. And of course, the last thing, your hydraulic hoses. You got your lift, which is right here, which is a single acting cylinder, so you're only going to have one hydraulic hose. And then you're going to have your swing, which is two hydraulic hoses. That's a double acting cylinder. So pretty simple to hook this machine up, but a few things to remember there to make sure you have everything set right, and should work pretty good for you. All right, what we're going to do here today in this segment is we're going to set our cut height, our tilt, and our float on our rotary mocos, on the John Deere rotary mocos. Specifically, we've got the 630 moco here, but the concepts that we're going to use here today pretty much apply all the way across the board, from the smallest of our mocos on up to our biggest windrowers. Right? All these concepts generally apply. You may set them a little bit differently. Windrowers you set from the cab, but mocos you set from the ground, but the concepts are the same. So always, whenever you're setting moco, you need to do it in this order: cut height, tilt, and then your float. If you do it in that order, everything will work out right. So first thing you want to do is we want to remove our locks. Okay, whenever you're transporting the John Deere mocos or working underneath them, always have your locks, your cylinder locks in place. Lock them up, and also your swing. So that's your lift lock, and then this is your swing lock. Okay, so this keeps it from swinging out. When you're in transport, I highly recommend that you lock that, because otherwise, something happens if you accidentally hit a lever or something, it could swing out on you. So make sure that's locked. So unlock both of those, and then go ahead and get up in the tractor, and then swing the moco out into the cutting position, and then set it on the ground to set this. The idea behind a John Deere cutter bar is that it's low profile. So in other words, it's pretty thin, and so that gets us closer to the ground and allows us to back our angle off to get a nice flat cut. You should get a pretty nice, even, flat cut out of a John Deere moco. When we get that, when you get it tipped back, not only does it give us a flat cut, but that keeps us up out of the rocks and things like that, and protects your knives and stuff like that. So the first thing we're going to do is, depending on what we're cutting, we're going to set our cut height. So the cut height is set down here with our gauge shoes. The gauge shoes run on the ground. They are the virtual downstop, if you will, of the machine. Stock on these machines, there's 3 holes. This will give you a cut height up to about 3 inches or so, 3.5. If you need to go higher, we do offer gauge shoe extensions that you can bolt on there to get you up into that north of 4 inches range. Most of the time, for cutting wheat or something like that, the moco is set right now with the gauge shoes all the way down, so we're at the highest cut height, because a lot of times in wheat and rye and stuff like that, you want a little higher cut height. So then, once we get that set, then we're going to set our tilt. Okay, John Deere mocos, like I said, you want to cut as flat as you can. There's 2 options for the tilt. You've got a turnbuckle, which is most of what we sell, and then you've got a hydraulic option. The hydraulic option, obviously, you can change the tilt from the cab. So most of what we sell is the turnbuckle. Most of the time when guys set this, they probably don't change it too much. But should you get into some down crop or something like that where you need to go down and actually get it, you may have to take this and really stand it on its nose to go get that. But today, the way we've got it set is we've got it backed off just about all the way. But I'm going to give it just a little bit of tilt. Sometimes that makes the machine just a little bit aggressive, which is nice. To get our actual cut height, once we set our gauge shoes, and then we set our tilt, then you can easily go to the front and measure your actual cut height, the distance between the ground and your knife, and that'll give you an actual cut height. All right, now that we've got our cut height and our tilt set, where we're going to run most of the day, then we need to set our float. Float is what keeps the weight off the cutter bar and onto the tires. Float can either, if you set float too light, the machine can bounce and you can actually miss crop, especially if you're going at higher rates of speed. The higher rates of speed you're going, usually the heavier the float you need. If you have it set too heavy, a lot of times you'll get our gauge shoes that we just set the height on will actually make skids across the ground. Or you'll start to feel your tractor really pulling hard because you got too much weight on here and not enough on your tires. We want to put as much as we can on the tires. So in order to set float, what we're doing is we're dealing with these two springs right here. Or this spring, there's one on both sides, one on each side. And that spring stretch is what gives us our float. And how we set the float, you come over here to the side, and you come over here and you just give this a little budge. You don't have to lift it up really high, 6 inches, whatever. Just an inch or two off the ground. You can kind of budge it with about 110 to 115 pounds of lift. That's a really good starting point. Now 115 pounds, 110, 15 may be different for different people, but ultimately at the end of the day, if it's too light, you're going to see some bouncing and some porpoising across the field. If it's too heavy, you'll probably see some skidding of the gauge shoes, or the tractor, is obviously going to show you because it's going to take more power to pull it. Now, you do it on one side, then you got to go over and do it on the other side. So you got to do it on both sides. The two springs will have a different stretch to them. This is your adjustment, and this is how you adjust your float. Okay, more or less. The threads showing are going to be less on this side. In other words, there's going to be more spring stretch on this side than there will be on that side because we've got a gearbox over here, and there's more weight on this side of the machine. So it takes a little more float, spring stretch to get the proper float over here. If you dramatically change your tilt, and that's so in other words, if I run into maybe some down crop or something, and I go ahead and I got to go down and get it, so I really got to stand this thing on its nose and go get it. As I'm doing this, two things are happening. One, the center of gravity is kind of moving forward, and also, if you'll watch, this spring is starting to depress a little bit. So as that's happening, we're getting less float. So once I get to where I need to be, then I need to go ahead and I need to reset my float because it is going to dramatically change. So then I'll need to come over here and try and lift that. And that, as I lifted that, I know that got dramatically heavier. So I need to come back and adjust my float to get that where it needs to be. If you do that, set your cut height, your tilt, and your float in that order. Once you get it set, a lot of guys probably won't ever change it. But as long as you change it in that order each time, every time you do change it, you should come out right, and the Moco should give you a really nice cut and perform really, really well for you.